Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to start roasting coffee at home. Now we're not going to talk about the different types of roasters or methods you can use. The goal of this video is to help you understand the roasting process so that you can apply this information to any method you choose. Now as I'm talking you through this, I'll be putting clips on the screen because I want to make sure that you know exactly how to apply everything that we're talking about in this video. Alright, so let's go roast some coffee. Okay, so in order to learn how to roast the way you want, you're going to need to start controlling the variables so that you can roast consistently. So the first thing we're going to do before any roast is to weigh out the beans. Now when we're done with the roast, we're going to weigh the beans again, and then we're going to use those two numbers to calculate the percentage of weight that was lost during the roasting process so that we know exactly how this roast is going to compare to our last one or to our next one. Now don't worry if you don't know how to do that because I will walk you through it when we're finished with this sample roast today. So first, let's weigh our beans. Okay, so today we're roasting this farm blend from Unleashed Coffee, and I'm gonna do a 200 gram batch. So I'm just gonna weigh this out here. Perfect. Okay, so coffee roasting happens in several stages. First is the drying phase where the beans just stay green, they're just moving around, starting to build up some temperature. Then you go through the yellowing phase where you'll see this very distinct yellow color. After that they start browning and starts to look a little more like coffee, but it's still very light. And then once the internal temperature is high enough, all the moisture inside the beans is going to try to break out, and we hit what we call the first crack. So you can think of this just like popcorn, and it begins kind of the same way. So first there's some outliers where you hear one crack and then another, and then a couple more, but they're kind of spaced out a lot. And then you'll hear that it picks up momentum. It starts really going, and the crack really starts moving along, and it's going to build up to a crescendo, and then it's going to start to slowly taper off. So just like that bag of popcorn in your microwave. Now after that first crack, there's going to be a brief period in between where it's nice and quiet. This is the lull. Okay, so after this lull, if you continue roasting, you're going to hit what's called the second crack, and this is not as strong as the first one, but you'll definitely still hear the sound. But this is now dark roasting territory, so some of you might never get to this point, some of you might want to get to this point, but it's definitely important that you understand what the second crack sounds like so that you know whether you've gone too far or if you're getting to where you want to be. Now when you're learning to roast coffee to the degree you want, it's very important to know these different sounds and stages so that you can stop your coffee at the light, the medium, or the dark level, depending on your preference. And so I'm going to give you examples of all of those so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's talk about how far you should go to get to a light roast, a medium roast, or a dark roast. Now keep in mind that these are not defined points, these are all spectrums. So light roast is just a stage that happens, same with medium and dark. But there are some simple signs to look out for that will help you get to the stage you prefer. Okay, so for a light roast, remember that first crack is going to build momentum, reach a peak, and then start to taper off. So anytime after that peak, but while first crack is still happening, that's a great place to stop your coffee for a light roast. Now you can stop earlier than this. Anytime after first crack has begun will be drinkable coffee, but I would strongly suggest you take your coffee up to that peak and then stop it there. and then see if you think it needs a little more or less time for your next batch. So for a medium roast, you're going to go all the way through first crack, and you're going to wait until there's silence. So once first crack has completely finished, but before you get to the second crack, that is a good place for medium roast. Now, it can start to get a little too dark very quickly at this point, so I would suggest that as soon as the first crack stops, you stop it right there and start cooling your beans. That's going to be a really nice medium roast. Okay, so if you want to make dark roasted coffee, you have to understand that at this stage of the roast, things progress very quickly. So at this point, 15 seconds can make a huge difference in your coffee, so you need to be very careful. But what you want to do is take your coffee up to the point that the second crack begins. So you'll hear those first few pops of the second crack, and then I would highly recommend you stop the roast within that first 15 seconds of second crack. Beyond that, it's going to get very dark very quickly, so I really encourage you to aim for that 15-second window and just take it from there. Maybe you decide you want a little more or a little less, but that's a great place to aim for if you want dark roasted coffee. For me, if I do want a darker roast, I'll stop as soon as I hear that first pop of second crack, and that is quite dark enough for me. Okay, so once you've got your coffee roasted to the level that you want, you're gonna need to cool your beans, and you're gonna want to do it quickly. The beans will have a high temperature at this point, and so if you don't cool them efficiently, they will continue moving further along the roast. So sometimes, even though you stopped the beans at a nice medium roast, they will have enough heat left in them that you'll start to hear that second crack happening if you don't cool them quickly enough. Okay, now according to all the coffee experts in the world, it is best if you can cool your beans down to room temperature in 4 minutes or less. So some roasters are going to do this for you. Other roasters have a very long cooling cycle, which really you shouldn't be using. But one really easy way to do this is to just take your beans and dump them out into a metal colander and just start shaking it around for a couple of minutes. Now, as you're doing this, you'll see that a lot of the chaff is going to be falling out from the colander. So chaff is this skin, it's part of the coffee bean that gets released during roasting. If it ends up in your coffee, it's fine, it's tasteless, it doesn't matter if you grind it up and brew it. You're not going to notice, so don't worry too much about it. But chaff is what is going to create the largest mess in the whole roasting process. Okay, so you just finished roasting, and now we want to allow the coffee to rest for 24 to 48 hours before we start drinking it. So coffee usually reaches its optimum flavor between days 3 and day 7 after roasting. And the reason we want to allow it to rest for that first 48 hours is because the coffee goes through a process called off-gassing. So CO2 is being released from those beans during this time, and we want to just allow that process to happen as much as possible so that we can get the best flavor from our coffee. Now, it's perfectly okay to use your beans the same day you roast them, but the coffee will have more body and more flavor if you wait a couple of days. Okay, so I highly recommend you keep a roast log, and I'm just going to show you the simple version here. So we have the starting weight, 200 grams, the ending weight, 166.6, then the percentage of moisture loss was 16.7, and I'll show you that calculation in a moment. Also, we have first crack began 5 minutes and 15 seconds into the roast, and then I dropped the beans, which means I started cooling them at 7 minutes and 35 seconds. So from first crack to the drop was 2 minutes and 20. So all this information is going to help me know how to make my beans a little bit darker or a little bit lighter according to my preferences for the next roast. So this percentage is really an excellent indicator for comparing roasts. And the way you'd get that is you take the starting weight, you subtract the ending weight. That gives you the difference here. So then if you take the difference and you divide it by the starting weight, that's going to give you a decimal, 0.167 this time, which we just convert by moving this over. We convert it to 16.7%. Yikes. That is super dark. I normally prefer my coffees around 13.5% moisture loss or 14%. And that's going to vary from variety to variety, of course, but absolutely, this is going to be way too dark for me. So next time, I'm going to want to take this 2 minutes and 20 down to about 1 minute and 45 or something like that. So keeping track of this will make it very easy for you to know how you want to do your next roast differently. Okay, so that should be plenty of information to get you started, and I really hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed the video or helped you out in any way, you can do me a favor by hitting the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Now, if you have any additional questions or comments, please reach out to me. I would love to connect with more of you in the comments section. All right, well, that's gonna do it for me, so get out there and roast, and I will see you in the next video. All right, peace.